how helping behaviors can decrease our well-being and also strengthen our or decrease our loneliness and strengthen our well-being. I find that loneliness is something that's especially pervasive. I think Mars already touched on this in social exclusion, where this is especially during COVID, where people are socially isolating from their loved ones and socially distancing from friends and acquaintances as well. Loneliness has been especially prominent in COVID-19. For example, one study found that in the US, approximately 44% of US adults experienced feeling lonely on at least one day in the past week during COVID. And then another study in the UK found that approximately a third of the population experienced general loneliness. So loneliness obviously is prevalent in the general population. However, looking closer to home as well, loneliness is also pervasive, where Dr. Harry Reese has found at the U of R that his students have experienced increasing levels of loneliness since 2002. And this is especially important because even outside of the COVID pandemic, this is something that's increasing over the past couple of decades. And given that loneliness is pervasive and increasing, this is especially concerning given the health consequences of being lonely. For example, people who are lonely have a 26% greater chance of early mortality. They also have worse mental health problems like depression and also worse sleep quality. In addition, people who are lonely have worse meaning in life and lower satisfaction in life. And finally, people who are lonely also tend to be more shy and more hostile and wary of other people, which leads to decreased quality of their social interactions as well. Therefore, because loneliness is something that's pervasive and increasing with also detrimental consequences, the focus of my project is how to reduce loneliness. And what I propose is reducing loneliness through pro-social behaviors and orientation. So first, a pro-social behavior is specifically a behavior that helps and benefits other people, while a communal orientation, in terms of the study, is a tendency to help and expect help from others. And these already have, research has already found that these have rewards from being pro-social. For example, people who are more pro-social experience greater personal well-being in terms of greater daily self-esteem, greater meaning in life, and then more positive feelings like happiness. They also experience greater relational quality. And in contrast to how loneliness is detrimental to our lifespan, where it leads to greater mortality, people who are more pro-social tend to have a longer lifespan. And there's, therefore, in this study, what I propose is that another reward in pro-sociality is in decreasing loneliness. And this is one because people who are more pro-social may have increased social connection, whereby helping others, especially if they help a close relationship partner, may allow them to connect with people to a greater degree. In addition, it also may provide an opportunity for social interaction, or interventions to loneliness have already examined that enhancing social interaction has been a strong intervention. There's already been research on helping in loneliness. For example, past research has found that in adolescents, adolescents who report more pro-social behavior towards their peers experience less reports of loneliness. And additionally, in older adults, a population that is especially prone to loneliness, research has found that older adults who volunteer for at least 2 hours a week experience less loneliness as well. Therefore, in the current study, what I'm looking at is how, if these findings generalize and extend, where do these arise in adult populations as well? Additionally, I want to extend them into a daily experience design, looking at loneliness and well-being in daily life. And going further than this, I want to look at if there are positive consequences from decreasing loneliness as well. In this case, enhancing well-being. Therefore, I hypothesize that people who are more pro-social with others would be associated with greater personal well-being, and as well as greater relational well-being. And additionally, I hypothesize that this would be explained by decreased feelings of loneliness. So again, people who are more pro-social should experience greater well-being, which should be explained by decreased loneliness. For my first study, I recruited 670 adults from the recruitment platform Research Match, participants were volunteers, and participants were generally around 50 years old, with majority women and majority European American. Furthermore, I conducted a cross-sectional study that was fully online, where I used self-report measures for my measures, and I focused on helping towards close relationship partners Our research in the past has found that pro-social targets where people generally help their friends rather than strangers more often, and as well they also help their in-groups rather than outward numbers. So this is why I found that close relationship partners was an optimal target of pro-social behaviors to measure. So in terms of analyses, I conducted mediation analyses, and I standardized my variables and submitted them to path analysis. And in order to estimate my indirect effects, I used 5,000 bootstrap examples. My measures included a measure of pro-social behavior, and additionally loneliness. Furthermore, I measured satisfaction of life, meaning in life, positive negative affect, romantic relationship quality, and participants who did not have a romantic relationship, I asked a friendship quality scale about their best friend. What I found was that people who are more pro-social experience greater personal well-being in terms of greater satisfaction of life, greater meaning in life, greater positive affect, and then marginally less negative affect. Additionally, I found that this was explained by decreased feelings of loneliness. And the results also follow for the next few results where, again, I found people who are more pro-social in general experience greater romantic relationship quality. And again, this was explained by decreased feelings of loneliness. And finally, for friendship quality, I found that people who are more pro-social experience greater friendship quality with their best friends, which is again explained by decreased feelings of loneliness. Therefore, from study one, what I found was that people who reported being more pro-social experience greater personal well-being as well as greater stronger relationships. And I found that this was explained by decreased feelings of loneliness. So I also ran another study where I recruited 247 undergrads from the U of R. Their participants were around 20 years old, generally female, and then also majority Asian and Asian American. I also conducted this in the spring of 2021, and I think we all remember that was a completely online college setting where loneliness was especially prevalent, I feel like. So for the study, participants first completed a background survey, and after 3 days after the background survey, they started completing daily measures where they completed the 14-day daily experience study. So participants completed about one survey every evening for 14 days. They averaged about 9.36 diaries, and then total we got around 2,322 diaries. For this study, I hypothesized that people who were more communally oriented relative to others would experience greater daily well-being, and again, this would be explained by decreased feelings of daily loneliness. So for this, I conducted a multi-level mediation, where I did 2-on-1 mediations as communal orientation as my level 2 variable, with loneliness and well-being as my level 1. And then for my indirect effects, I used multi-correlative mediation. So initially, participants did the background measure of communal orientation. And then 3 days after that, they began getting to complete daily measures. So they completed the daily measure of loneliness, of satisfaction with life, positive negative affect, and then of relational quality. And this time, relational quality was with best friends and romantic partners merged together. So here I found that people who are more communally oriented relative to others experience greater daily satisfaction with life. And again, I found this was explained by decreased feelings of daily loneliness. So next, I found that similarly with positive affect, the participants are more communally oriented relative to others experience greater daily positive affect, again explained by decreased feelings of daily loneliness. Negative affect, I found a bit different results where I found no association between communal orientation and negative affect. However, taking into account loneliness actually enhances the association. And this is something I'll mention again in future slides. However, with daily relational quality, I found again that people who are more communally oriented experience greater relational quality with friends and romantic partners, which was explained by decreased feelings of loneliness. Therefore, from study 2, I found that people who are more communally oriented and more motivated to help others, they experience greater personal well-being, and they also experience stronger relationships in daily life. And similar to study 1, I found that this was explained by decreased feelings of daily loneliness. So therefore, I found support that people who are more pro-social experience greater well-being, which is explained by feeling less lonely. However, there's also another model that could be in play here, where people who are more pro-social may feel less loneliness, and this may be explained by greater well-being. In this case, people who help others more may feel happier, and by being happier, they may have more connections with other people and feel less lonely. So to compare these two models, I computed reductions in total effects from both analyses, and I found across both studies that the original model had much larger reductions in total effect. This implies that loneliness contributes to well-being to a greater degree than well-being contributes to loneliness, and therefore gives greater support to the original model. So another consistent finding that I wanted to bring up was with negative emotions, where in here I found that people who are more pro-social experienced either negatively, marginally less negative affect, or no more or no less negative affect. And when I took into account loneliness, however, this enhanced the association and actually made it significantly positive. This implies that there's another variable present in the study, that's an untested mediator, that is increasing negative affect. And to speculate on this, one variable may be an empathy, where people may feel more empathetic when they feel more pro-social, which leads to feeling more negative emotions from others. However, otherwise I'm unclear so far what this is. So to move on, I wanted to go into limitations, future directions. So one of the major limitations was the self-report measures for this study, where social desirability bias is especially prevalent in terms of pro-social behavior report skills, where people do want to appear more helpful than other people. Therefore, future research could perhaps incorporate multiple methodologies, for example, self-report measures, as well as self-report behavioral pro-social measures in terms of donations to charity, for example, and also sort of behavior. And another major limitation is the correlation nature of both studies, where neither of the studies can determine causality or directionality here. However, I'm currently working on study 3. This is where I manipulate pro-social behavior, and then I test causality between pro-social behavior and then loneliness and well-being. So to sum this up, I wanted to just bring us back to the beginning of the presentation, where loneliness is something that's especially prevalent in most modern times. For example, the New York Times headline of loneliness is damaging for health, where they mentioned that there's an epidemic of loneliness even before the pandemic. Furthermore, folks in the media like the Lonely Century by Nuri Kurtz cites loneliness as one of the major problems in the 21st century, mentioning how the UK, for example, has implemented a Minister of Loneliness, and how people also began renting out service where they rent friends just because they feel lonely. Additionally, more articles like CNBC have also cited an epidemic of loneliness. So loneliness is obviously especially prevalent before the pandemic, but now especially so during the pandemic. However, the current studies suggest, of course, pending is study 3, that's experimental, that within this epidemic of loneliness, one way that we can help to diminish these feelings is through helping other people. And in the same vein, this also brings up the promising avenue of pro-social interventions, where pro-social interventions may be a way to decrease loneliness. Typically, pro-social interventions are in the form of personally meaningful community service, where schools might require this, or course may require something like this, as well as other interventions that may promote variables directly associated with pro-sociality, like empathy and gratitude. And these typically lead to enhancing pro-social helping behaviors, and as well as enhancing empathy. And they also have been seen to increase academic achievement in adolescents, as well as lower levels of aggressive behaviors in adolescents as well. And therefore, the current studies also suggest that perhaps decreasing loneliness may be another reward from these pro-social interventions. To some, loneliness is something that's pervasive to our health, pervasive and also negative to our health and well-being, especially since it's on the rise. However, the current study suggests, of course, pending study 3, that helping others and being motivated to help other people may be one way we can work to decrease this loneliness. And additionally, with this, helping others may bring other benefits in strengthening our personal well-being and also the quality of relationships with others. Thank you.